5. Back at home, we need to do something to take our minds off everything that's happened, at least for a couple of hours. The sun is starting to drop, and there's a chill in the air. I start to get dinner ready. Have you ever made rabbit stew? I ask Rose. Rabbit stew? She mimics me, smiling, and I notice for the first time the dimple she has on her right cheek. Didn't pick you for a cook, Finn. How do you reckon I've stayed alive this long? Eating grass? You're still scrawny. You could do with some fattening up yourself. We both go to work on the rabbit stew. I walk through to my veggie patch and pull up an onion and a bulb of garlic. They're only small, but Rose gasps when she sees them. You're full of surprises, scrawny boy, she says. I should be annoyed, but it seems that suddenly all I want is to hear her talking, saying anything, saying my name. I like the way she has to show her teeth to make the F sound, the way they sit on her bottom lip. We stand next to each other and she cuts the onion while I pull the rabbit apart. It's quiet apart from the knife on the bench and the tearing sound of the flesh coming away from the bone. I can feel her there, without us even touching. I start to rub salt into the pieces of rabbit. Can I? She asks. What? She licks the end of her finger, dips it into the salt and puts it into her mouth. She closes her eyes. Salt always reminds me of Stan, she says. He put it on everything. In summer, he'd come in from the paddocks before dinner and open a beer. Just one. He only ever had one stubby. He always had radishes in the fridge. Loved the things. He'd sprinkle salt over them and crunch into them like he was eating apples. Have one, Rose, he'd say, but they just tasted like salty dirt to me. She gazes out through the kitchen window, like Stan might be out there somewhere. Stan called you Rose, not Water. Rose. Always Rose. What about Finn? Where does that come from? I don't want to say, but I'm starting to feel so relaxed with her I can't help myself. Anything to keep the conversation going. Finbar, I say. It was my grandpa's name. He was Irish. I bet you copped shit at school for that. Yeah, to start with, but everyone got used to it. You know what guys are like with nicknames? Sharky. That's what they all called me. I like Finn better, she says. We fry the onion and garlic in a pan, and the kitchen fills with the smell of it. A smell that's linked to memories. Mum and Dad were both good cooks, but Dad's curries were a specialty. The kitchen would be filled with the smell of garlic and onion, and then he would put in the curry paste and chilies, and they were so strong that the smell alone could make you cough and wheeze. When the onion and garlic are nice and brown, I spoon them into a pot with the rabbit pieces, add water, more salt, and a precious piece of parsley I picked yesterday. I set the heat to low, and we sit back down at the table. The light is starting to die outside, and I realise the day is almost gone. As much as we tried to fill them, the days would sometimes drag when it was just Rowdy and me. Now, with Rose here, time seems to be moving so much faster. The stew starts to bubble in the pot. I know the cooking has just been a distraction. We'll have to figure out how we can find Kaz and bring her here. Tell me what happened after Swans Marsh. If we're going to sort out a plan for finding Kaz, I need more to go on. As soon as I say this, all her calm seems to dissolve, and she looks agitated, her knees jigging under the table again. By the time I got clear of the town buildings, Kaz and the horse were gone, she says. I knew Ramage and his men would figure out what had happened soon enough, and they'd follow me. I didn't care. If they were looking for me, that meant they weren't looking for Kaz. There was no sign of her. The next morning it pissed with rain. I kept listening for the sound of the trail bike. The road wound up through the forest to the top of the ridge. There's an old campground up there. I know this spot well. It's called Pinch Gut Junction. 2 forest tracks go off in either direction along the line of the ridge, while the main road goes straight up over the top before it drops down towards the coast. The road passes through a big cutting, Rose continues. It was the perfect spot to ambush anyone on the road. I wasn't going to walk through it, so I climbed to the top of the cutting. When I looked over the edge, sure enough, men were there. Then everything went quiet, and I couldn't believe what I saw. Kaz was riding her horse right into the cutting, and she had someone on the back with her. I don't know who it was, boy or girl, but they looked about the same size as Kaz. I didn't even think. I stood up and yelled at Kaz that it was a trap. Just as I did, Ramage's men came out into the open. I threw some rocks at them, then I ran along the top so they'd follow me. I wanted to draw them away from Kaz. My plan worked, kind of. They did come, but now I had to outrun them. The kitchen window is fogged up with the steam from the pot. I pull the blinds down, light the candle, and set it on the table between us. Rose leans forward in her chair and rubs her eyes. Kaz could be anywhere by now, Finn, and it's all my fault. I acted like an idiot at Swansmarsh, took a stupid, dumb risk. We should have stuck together. Well, you can't do anything about that now, I say. At least we know she's not alone. There was someone else on the horse. But just some kid. Okay, but she's got a better chance than if she was on her own. Maybe. And she knows the plan was to head south if you got split up, so she could still be trying to get through. She knows not to try to go through Pinch Gut Junction again. Rose must know this is making sense, but it doesn't stop her fretting. She's picking at the bandage on her hand again. We can't do anything tonight anyway, I say. We both need to sleep. If we're going to try to find her, we'll need all the energy we can get. Rose doesn't argue, and the smell of the stew has filled the kitchen. She's tired. Her eyes are starting to droop, and she cups her hands under her chin. I turn to the sink, pour us glasses of water and put them on the table. They're a bit murky, which means the header tank must be getting low. I remind myself to pump some more water up to it tomorrow. How old are you? She asks suddenly, like it's the most important question ever. Almost 16 by now, I say, easing myself into the chair. What about you? 19, I suppose. I just started at a new school, Wentworth High, when it all started. Rose gasps. You were a Wentworth wanker? I laugh. Yeah, a Wentworth wanker. But where'd you hear that? You said you weren't allowed to go to school. From one of the girls at the feed store. Her name was Caroline. She went to some exclusive girls' school before. Probably Scarborough, I say. Scarborough skanks, we called them. It makes me stop for a bit, thinking about school, how organised and regular it all was. Bells and timetables, start and finish times. The way every day was so neatly divided up. My whole life was sport and surfing and school. Mucking around, me and my mates would surf every day, stay out till it was too dark to see the sets, then paddle in and head home for dinner. The weekends were footy and hanging around the netball courts to watch the girls. Pretty normal stuff. Perving, she says. Kinda, I say, a bit embarrassed. I took it all for granted. But who doesn't when that's all you know? Who expects a disease to rip through and kill everyone? Then the survivors all clear out and leave you behind. Rowdy gets to his feet and nuzzles up against my leg. I scratch him in his favourite spot under his chin, and he lets out a dog moan. Then he sniffs at Rose's feet and nudges her with his nose. Where's the spot you scratch him? She asks. I move around the table to show her. Next thing, Rowdy has his nose in her lap and looks as contented as can be. We had 4 working dogs on the farm, Rose says. Leela, Hamish, Coco and Archie, all Kelpies. They were never allowed in the house. But I used to make cosy spots for them in the hay shed so they could keep warm in winter. I don't know where I would have been without Rowdy. He's the best mate I've ever had. Rose looks around the kitchen, as though she's seeing it for the first time, before her eyes come to rest on me again. Still, it must have been tough, she says finally. So long on your own. I've never wanted to admit being lonely. It only made things worse if I stewed on it. But now, with Rose here, it's like I can let it go. Yeah, I say. It was. We clear the table to eat. I think about where to sit, next to her or on the other end of the table. Sharing our stories has made me more comfortable with her being here. It feels like she's opening up, but I'm still trying to piece together everything she's told me. I dish up the stew. Rose eats slower this time, using the knife and fork instead of her hands. She seems distracted though, fiddling with her food. "I've got to find Kaz," she says at last. I can't think about anything else. I don't expect you to help. I've brought you enough trouble already. Ramage knows you're here, and he knows I'm with you. He'll be back with more men, and they'll track us down. They'll bring dogs." I wipe my mouth with the back of my hand. "I don't get it about Ramage," I say. "Why is he so determined to find you?" Rose won't look at me. "Sorry," she mutters. "There's stuff I just can't tell you. Not yet." I must have been wrong about the trust building between us. I know she can see I'm hurt, but I want her to feel it. I've risked everything for her, taken her in, fed her, and now she's holding out on me? I thought we... Finn, she says in a tired voice that makes her sound so much older than me. "I'm so grateful. You saved me yesterday, and you've treated me so nicely. I feel like I owe you. So tell me then." "There's stuff I can't bring myself to talk about, and none of it will help me find Kaz." She stirs her stew. "I'm going to leave tomorrow to look for her. Please don't feel you have to come. I'll be okay." I'm shaking my head. I've already made my decision about going with her. "We need to think this through," I say. "Kaz could still be heading down here towards the coast. We could miss her and end up getting caught ourselves." Rose doesn't have an answer to this, and I feel as though I've had a small victory. "You better eat your stew before it goes cold," I say. She looks down at the bowl as though she's forgotten it's there, then starts eating again. This gives me a chance to think, to convince her to stay for a few days longer to see if Kaz arrives. When she lifts the fork to her mouth, I see how dirty and stained the bandage is where she stitched her hand. She keeps flexing her fingers, and the lower half of her arm is red and swollen. We need to change that bandage too. "It feels strange," she says, finishing her last mouthful of stew and unwinding the bandage. "My fingers keep twitching, and it's like my whole arm's got pins and needles." The last part of the bandage has stuck to the skin, and she winces as she peels it away. The wound itself is almost black, and where she's pushed the needle through the skin is bright red. I feel my heart quicken. The infection is spreading up her arm. "That doesn't look good," I murmur. I remember there are some antibiotics in the bathroom that I brought over from the old house. I kick myself for not having thought of them earlier. In the cabinet, I find a dozen different capsule containers, and I try to think of the name of the ones I took when I had tonsillitis years ago. I know we had some left over. For some reason, the name Eric is in my head. Mum used to say, "Finn, it's time for Eric." The labels are faded, and some are unreadable. I take them all out and line them up on the kitchen table. "Maybe we should just try take a lucky dip," Rose says. She starts to read the labels. Celebrex, Toradol, erythromycin. "That's it, Eric," I say. "It's an antibiotic." "There's 2 bottles of it. Not much in this one," she says, shaking it. "But this one's full." She studies the label. They're way past their use-by date, but they've got to be better than nothing. Afterwards, she allows me to dress her hand. I tear up an old sheet for a bandage and clean the stitches in warm water before squeezing more antiseptic cream onto the wound. I can see the hairs standing up on her forearm. "Take 2 of the antibiotics now," I say. "And another couple first thing in the morning, I reckon. We'll have to be real careful with the infection. I don't think we should travel until it's under control. Maybe a week?" "No way," she says, the edge finding its way back into her voice. "I'm leaving tomorrow." She's glaring at me with sharp eyes again, but the pain must be playing on her mind. It's something I've worried about for as long as I've been on my own. Getting really sick and not having anyone here to look after me. Or getting bitten by a snake out in the bush. Or stung by a blue-ringed octopus when I'm feeling around for crabs in the rock pools. The candle gives a last splutter, and we are thrown into the dark. I can't see Rose across the table, but I hear her yawn. You should get some sleep, I say. I'll go and do a check around the neighbourhood. She says goodnight, and I see her silhouette shuffle down the hall to the bedroom. I slip out the back door and head for the beach, keeping to the back tracks just in case. I make it to the platform above the river mouth as the moon begins to rise over the cliffs out towards Red Rock Point. The wind is still offshore, and I can just make out the white water peeling along the sandbar. I can tell by the sound it makes when it crashes on the inside bar that it's still pretty solid, maybe 4 or 5 feet. If there's no sign of the Wilders in the morning, I'll paddle out early and grab a few waves to clear my head.